Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy, Fat Man to Iron Man. I hope you are well today and I hope your training is going well. How has your week been? For me personally, unfortunately, I've got a bit of a bone stress related injury within my foot around my big toe. So I am actually not running at the moment. However, I'm working on that rehab. So how is your journey going? How are you getting on? Great to hear from some of you recently. So if you do want to get in contact on any of the social media platforms. Come and say hello. Just let me know how you're getting on. It's great to follow your journey. So today's episode is part one of an inspirational interview that I had the pleasure of doing recently. So we'll head straight over. So welcome, Ben, to the Ultra Running Podcast with Coach Marshy. Great to have you on the show today, Ben. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
So firstly, can you start off by just introducing yourself? Who are you? What do you do? What are you all about? What's your involvement in running? What do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Ben. I'm 48 years old. I live in a village called Gaisley, which is between Newmarket and Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. I've been running, I suppose, I really started running about 20 years ago, and then built up through the distances and then, sort of got into marathons. Stuck at marathons for a while, for a few years, trying to get as fast as I possibly could. And, I've done a bit more. I've done a few ultras and gone a bit further and some multi-day sort of things as well of late.
Fantastic. And before we get on to running specifically, BBC2 Hell Week.
Yes,
you
I was
part of that.
Yes, I was. I went on that on 2016. I applied for it, with not really thinking I'd have a chance of getting in, but I think there was about 5,000 people applied for it, and I kept getting through to the next stage and to the next stage, and finally I was one of the 22 people who made it. We filmed it in South Africa, which was pretty cool. With BBC flew us down there, and yeah, it's good fun. I really enjoyed it. It was hard, and it was hot, and it was grueling and brutal. But I'd signed up for it. I did enjoy it. I didn't think it was really, really hard physically. It was hard physically, but it wasn't that hard physically. It was sort of like mentally, it was difficult. I was away from my family, my children, and having no contact with the outside world was what I really struggled with, and it's sort of the reason I left in the end. Well, I sort of lost my temper, and yeah, but I got to the end of there's 6 programs, and I got to the end of the 4th one. There was only 8 or 9 people left at this point, and I should have really gone on further, but I didn't. I lost my temper, and that was that. I was done, and I was on the plane back home. But yeah, great experience, and look back on that time very, very fondly.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say about the mental side being tougher maybe than the physical. You're obviously a very fit bloke, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But so what is Vivo? Tell me about Vivo. What's that?
So Vivo Outdoor Fitness is my day job, and it's, I don't like the word boot camp particularly because I think boot camp actually should really mean something else, but everybody else calls it a boot camp. I never do. They all do. And it's basically an outdoor fitness class that we host on Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays. We have a 6 a.m. class, a 7 a.m., 9:30, and then a midday, and then a 6 in the evening and 7 in the evening. And our class sizes are capped. We've always been capped at 30, and funnily enough, when we came out of the first lockdown, everything was 30 people. So a lot of these other classes were having to bring their classes smaller, but from day one, we'd always said no more than 30. So I like to keep it quite sort of personable still, and if there's 30 people there and one coach, there's probably never going to be more than 4 or 5 lifting weights. The rest of them are doing body weights, so that I can keep an eye on people and keep them safe. And yeah, it's good fun, bit sort of functional fitness, bit of everything really, out in all weathers, and like a great bunch of members. They're just awesome, and it's a privilege for me to be able to be their coach and to go and be in that field and coach them, because I've worked predominantly in the building industry most of my life, all of my life. I left school early and worked on the roofs mostly, but coached in the evenings and weekends for the last sort of, I've been a boxing coach for 20 years now. I've been coaching. I got into CrossFit a few years ago and started doing CrossFit coaching. So I've always wanted to do, had this vision of trying to set this up, and we set it up 2 years ago with 0 members, you know, and we worked hard at it. I run it. I run the field and the programming. My wife runs the admin side of it, and yeah, it's going great. Well, I mean, it was going great until COVID struck, but that's, you know, that's the world over, isn't it? So at the moment we're on Zoom and it's not ideal, and no one wants to be there. Well, not that's not true. They don't want to be there. Everyone would rather be in the field, high-fiving each other and getting muddy. But you know, well, it's not going to be long, I don't think. You know, I think it's going to be soon. We're going to be back out, and how much are we going to appreciate it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds like we've got a lot in common, Ben. Actually, sounds like we have a similar approach to our kind of fitness and our background. So, which is cool, and that whole kind of family ethos within our members groups and you know, coming together. It sounds like we've got that kind of thing in common. Maybe I should subject myself and come over and do a guest session and see what you can put me through, and vice versa. You can always come here as well.
Once a month we put on a speciality class, and it's called Hell Fit, and it's based on my experiences when I was in South Africa and some of the different exercises or cycles we had to do. And I never tell them where it's going to be. It's always somewhere different. So I'm always looking, where's a good, oh, look at that hill, you know, right. You know, and we've done log PT, rifle PT. I've had coaches come in. I've had, you know, army PTIs come in, and it's all a bit more serious. It's not so much, hi, how are you today, when they turn up. It's right, get ready, let's go, you know, a bit more. But they, you know, they know what it is. And it's always really good fun. Usually involves a lot of mud.
Sounds great. Sounds good. So running now, more specifically, you mentioned running in your intro there. So I was thoroughly entertained in December 2020 by this guy that someone I think we probably mutually know, a lady called Lauren in Ely, who I used to work with. She sort of highlighted this guy that was going to run 31 marathons in 31 days over December through Christmas in the middle of a pandemic. And I was amazed, and I couldn't believe, even though I've done my ultras and things, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And it was, in my opinion, as a coach and as a fellow runner, it was something that was absolutely inspiring and exceptional. So what is 31 marathons in 31 days? Why, what, how? Tell me about it.
So, you know, there's 2 reasons why I did it. One of them was I'd made a promise to a charity a few years ago. Someone from the charity who I know, and she'd asked me if I'd run London Marathon for her, and I couldn't because I think I'd already committed to somebody else. But I said to her, look, you've asked me, at some point in the future, I said, I can't help you now, but at some point in the future, I will try my hardest to do something for you. And I always knew that whatever I did for Tom's Trust was a charity, that it wasn't going to be right. You know, I'm not saying just the London Marathon, because it's not just the London Marathon, but it's not going to be like a marathon. It's either going to be something like an ultra, or I don't know, something abroad maybe. 31 marathons in 31 days. I've had it in my head for a couple of 3 years. I've seen a few people do it. I've never seen anyone do it for a time. It's always to complete it, which in itself, you know, is a phenomenal achievement. But my theory on it was I couldn't find any data or any evidence of anybody running them all under 4 hours. Some of them, they'd had some under 4 hours. Some of them had all of them over 4. A couple of them would have, you know, the last day would be the fastest. But I couldn't find any evidence of anybody running them under 4 hours. So I don't know how it came about, if I'm honest, Neil. It's just something that's in my head. When we went into lockdown last year, I started thinking about it a lot more. Started sort of really thinking, you know, it wasn't that long ago I'd done my first sort of back-to-back training run of 20 miles on a Saturday and then a 20 miles on a Sunday. And, you know, Saturday was all right. Sunday, horrible, depleted, energyless, you know, horrible. Why am I doing this? And then, you know, what I started doing was putting together blocks of training where I'd run a marathon every other day for 5 days, or for 10 days, so 5 marathons, seeing how that affected me. Then, you know, then I put a couple of marathons together on a Saturday and a Sunday, and then I'd recover from that. And then I'd just keep adding a little bit more and then recovering, you know. When I knew I was going to do it, I then spoke to the charity and said, look, I'm going to do it. And they was like, well, when are you going to do it? And I said, well, there's only 1 month I can do it. And that's, well, there's any month I can do it, but there's only 1 month I want to do it, and I want to do it in December. For the simple reason being that it's just going to make it that much harder. Also, you know, also from a fundraising point of view, there's not a great deal going on in December. Excuse me. I know it was in the pandemic, but you know, if it had been February, March time, everyone's marathon training, everybody's asking for sponsorship, and that's fine. But that you're in that sort of season almost. Whereas in December, you know, I knew it was going to create a stir when people would follow it, and I'm running on Christmas Day, and you know, when we had a lot of planning meetings with the charity and stuff, and they were saying all along that Christmas Day is going to be the day because people are going to be sat at home, they're going to be with their families. By the time they've eaten and they're full up and they've had a few beers, they're probably going to sit in there scrolling on their phone in the afternoon, and you know, and they're going to see this guy who's out running in whatever weathers and temperatures and trying to raise money for, you know, children who need help, and some of these children didn't make it, and you know, people sit there and look and appreciate what they have and donate, and you know, they did. They really, really did.
So what's the total so far?
So we set out to raise £31,000. £1,000 provides psychological, mental health support to a family with a child with a brain tumour for 1 year, and that can be the child, the parents, the uncles, the cousins, because it affects when this happens to a family, you know, luckily, hopefully, none of us will ever have to experience it. But when it happens to a child of a family, it doesn't just affect the child, it affects everybody. So what Tom's Trust do is they provide psychological and mental health support. So £1,000 will provide one family for a year. So we set out with what I thought was an ambitious target of raising £31,000. So we could 31 days, £1,000 a day. You know, and I've done a few fundraisers before, and if you hit double figures, you've done for a solo Just Giving page. If you hit double figures, you've done exceptionally well. It's usually a couple of £3,000, and if you hit a couple of £3,000, you know, and I've asked people before as well. So I'm really aware of always asking people all the time, you know, and some people do. They run the London Marathon every year, and they ask for sponsorship. Well, I have a thing, rightly or wrongly, is that I will always sponsor everybody. Anybody who asks me, I'll always sponsor them, but I'll only ever sponsor people once. So, you know, my friend's running a marathon, brilliant, I'll sponsor you 20 quid, but I'm not going to sponsor you 20 quid next year. I've already sponsored you, so I'll always sponsor everybody, but I'll only sponsor people once. So we set out to raise 31 grand. I thought it was a lot of money. Christmas Day, day 25, we was on 96,000. And I'd do a live video at the start every day and say, look, it's Christmas Day. Can we get this to 100 grand today? Put the phone down, team with me on the bikes. 2 miles in, they're checking. We've hit 100 grand already.
Wow.
Like, you know, it's unbelievable. I just couldn't then, still can't now get my head around the fact that we raised that much money. When I finished on December the 31st, we was on 140,000. It gone up to. As of today, and I just received a check come through the post this morning for £200 from a charity in Newmarket who's donated. We are now on £199,000.
Oh wow!
We're £1,000 short of being 200 grand. It's just unbelievable. I cannot work it out, and I can't fathom it out, and it just blows my mind.
Wow! So I reckon a little bit of a push, and maybe that we'll get over that. We'll see you get over that 200k mark. That's brilliant.
I come up with an idea this morning. I thought, I'll tell you what I'm going to do this weekend. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to stream it, and I'm going to say I'm not going to stop running until it's got to 200 grand. But then that might make people go the other way and see, right, let's see how far he can go then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Especially if they do their background on you as well as they look at it.
Give them a couple of days before we donate.
Yeah, no. Oh wow, so that is a huge amount of money, and I've got to say, watching from someone who had only sort of met you very briefly at an event previously, and kind of hadn't been following the journey up until that point, I sat there in amazement, and my family did. Christmas Day, we were looking at it. We did exactly what you said. Really, you know, you scroll in the afternoon, and it was just, this guy is just going day after day, and you know, here you are talking to us and listening to it. It makes it really real, and particularly, I don't know what day it was, but there was a time when you were wading through knee deep in water at one point because of a flood.
Because of a flood, and we come up to this village, and I saw a friend of mine. He was working in the village, and he stopped his truck and he said, "You ain't going left at the top, are you?" I said, "Yeah, we are." He went, "Oh mate, you won't get through. It's flooded." I said, "How deep?" He said, "Well, it comes over my wheels on my truck." And I was like, "Well, I've pre-planned every single one of these routes. I'm not going to deviate. That's it. We'll go through it. Simple as that. And I looked at his truck, and his wheels were about my mid-thighs, and I thought, right, sod it, we'll go through. And that's what we did. And as I went through, he pulled through the other side, and he stood there and filmed me as I was come through. And for some reason, as I ran past him, I just looked at him and said, completely off the cuff, I just said, "You cannot stop the unstoppable." And of course, he caught that on camera, and that video clip went viral. And it was crazy, really. But yeah, it's completely unintentional. I didn't know the flood was there until 10 seconds before I ran through it, and hadn't planned to say that or anything. It was just, that's what I thought. I'm not going to be stopped by a flood, so let's go.
No, it was great. It was great. It was great to see that. And what mile was it on that day?
12.
Oh, wow. So you still had to be wet for a long time to go.
Yeah. But it was all right. It wasn't too bad. It was ice cold, no different to really having an ice bath. So it did feel quite nice. There was a pothole in there that you didn't see just after I ran past the truck, and I nearly went over. I nearly stacked it. But other than that, it was all right. And yeah, it was cool. It was, in the grand scheme of things, having wet feet for 14 miles is not really, I was on day 17, 18. I was however many hundreds of miles I've ran that month. I was exhausted. Having wet feet probably wasn't really top of my list of problems I had at that moment.
Yeah, no, I can only try and imagine what that would have been like, to be fair. But so it looked like it went really well. I was going to say swimmingly well, but no. So it looked like it went well, and you were hitting those times that you'd set out, and like you said at the beginning, I think regardless of the time, just to achieve it full stop is a massive achievement. Forget the time, but obviously the time was going well, but then towards the end it did get really tough, and you had to walk one of them. Is that right?
Yeah. So on day 10, I only know this because I looked at my photos on my phone. On December the 10th was the first day I'd finished running, and in the evening I've got my foot up and I've got an ice pack on it, and all around this bottom of my foot was just a little black line of bruising just starting to come through. Ligament damage on my ankle. I've done this ankle playing football years ago, and it just really got progressively worse. It started at my ankle and then went around to my heel, and then sort of up my shin, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. But funnily enough, it wasn't too bad when I was running, and I don't know if that's because of adrenaline or whatever, but you could see on the videos I wasn't running naturally and I was lopsided, but it was just, it was almost manageable, but it wasn't right, and it looked awful. My leg looked awful. Day 28, I was running, and then I had to stop. Got pain in my leg, was unbearable. So I think up until day 28, my target, my average was 3:55 for overall the marathons. All of the marathons started with a 3 up until day 23. Day 23 was the first one I went over 4 hours. I had a really, really tough run that day. But because some of them, my quickest was 3:24. I was averaging mostly about 3:45, 3:50. So my average, it was my average over the 31 days I wanted under 4. Day 29, I ended up having to go to hospital because my leg was so bad, and it was like from the knee downwards, it didn't get any small, it didn't sort of come in like it should do. It just sort of went out. It almost looked like an elephant's foot.
Yeah.
And I know a guy I know saw it, and this guy's a race director, and he puts marathons on, and he stopped and he looked at it and he said, if you was in my race, he said, I would call you an ambulance. He said, you need to go to hospital and get this checked out. No, I was convinced it was a stress fracture. That's what I thought it was. But I was 3 days away from finishing. So it was like, well, I'll go to hospital on January the 1st, and whatever happens, I'm going to get this finished. And when he saw it, and he worried me really, because he said because if you've got a broken bone in there, you could have sepsis, you could have anything. He said it doesn't look right, you need to go. So I went to hospital, and had an X-ray and got a fantastic reception off the doctors when they said, what have you done? And I said, well, what I've been doing for the last 29 days is running 26.2 miles every day. Oh, and you wonder why your leg's the size of a balloon.
Yeah.
But thankfully it wasn't broken. It was basically inflammation of the shins and inflammation of my ankle ligaments. I had barely any movement in it. I couldn't sleep at night because it was just throbbing. So that's day 29. Day 30, I decided I was going to walk it. Kind of needed to rest my foot as much as I could. So I got up early and I got down to the racecourse in Newmarket at 5 a.m. Got some crutches and I walked up a 3/4 of a mile strip of road, up and down. 12 hours it took me, and it was, I wasn't just walking 26.2 miles, which is, in itself a long enough walk. I was walking 26.2 miles on the back of running 26 miles a day for 29 days. So I was shattered. I was exhausted. I'd had no sleep for a few days because of the pain. So yeah, it's a real slog of a day. But my friends, my family, my supporters, they all came up there. Everyone came up. I didn't have a minute when I was on my own. Everyone was coming up there and walking with me and bringing me drinks and hot chocolates and cakes and just really, because everyone was invested in it by this point. And this is the thing that really stood out for me. Yeah, I was gutted that my 4-hour thing had gone, and I'm not going to sit here and say I wasn't. But by this point, it had become something a bit bigger, or not a bit bigger, a lot bigger. And people started really getting behind it. And the people that are out, from about week 2 onwards, I'd post the route the night before, and it was reminding me of the London Marathon. It was like a carnival atmosphere. There was people on the route with their families. We're in lockdown. People weren't working. It's Christmas. Banners, flags, whistles, horns, and it was, but there wasn't 40,000 people come by. It was me and a couple of cyclists, and majority of the time I'm not looking great, and I'd turn a corner and people were bursting into tears, and I'm thinking, I know, I do look rough, I know, but how rough am I actually looking? But people were really becoming invested in it and like emotionally attached to it. Well,
yeah, I think,
don't know why.
Well, I think from a outside point of view, myself and my family, we were looking at it and we were like, well, this is inspirational from a running perspective because we enjoy running and we like to go out running, but from a human perspective as well, the pandemic, you were raising money for charity, it kind of gripped us, not just because we were runners, but because of what you were doing for others. And obviously, I guess within your community, that kind of just grew and grew and grew as it went on. But when you get that injury, I don't think anyone would have begrudged you for calling it a day. You'd done that many marathons already, you'd run all those miles, but for you weren't going to quit, right? You were just going to, you could see that.
Yeah, I wasn't going to quit. I thought the day before when I walked it, I finished, I said to my wife, I'm going to walk day 30. She was like, I think it's a good idea. How long is it going to take you? And I'm working it out. I'm thinking about 7 hours. 7 hours is walking at a clip, and that not on crutches. So it ended up taking me 12 hours. So I was there 5 in the morning till 5 in the evening. And in the end, I got rid of the crutches because I just was going so slowly just to try and. I wanted to get home. What I wanted to do is get home and get ready for day 31. And I got home because I'd taken the weight off my foot a bit, not a lot, a bit. Swelling had definitely gone down a bit and it wasn't as painful. Everyone was saying, what's happening tomorrow? What's happened last day? I didn't know. I still didn't know. I couldn't make that decision until I'd finished day 30. And I finished day 30 and I got home and I said to my wife, I'm going to run tomorrow. And she went, really? Why don't you just walk it? I said, no, I'm going to run it. I said, I don't care how long it takes, but I'm going to run it. And that's what I did. And it took me like 5.5 hours to run it. In the loosest sense of the terms, run, shuffle, jog, and I'd done a route. I'd done a 13.1 mile route that I ran twice out from the town up into all the villages and back round. So there was people everywhere. It was just incredible, really. The amount of people that are there. And, we were in lockdown and we're not meant to be out, but people are out and socially distanced. And it's incredible.
Brilliant. It was so good to see you go on that last day, having seen the update from day 30, and then you've gone out and you did it, and it was awesome. In the running community, in our little running club over at Histon, we were certainly all watching, and it was great to see, really inspirational. So brilliant. Awesome. So wow, what a first part to that interview. Listening to this guy Ben is absolutely unbelievable. What an achievement this guy has been and achieved in his running journey. So looking forward to part 2 next week. So hopefully we can meet you here again next week on the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy, to see the second part of how Ben's journey has moved on through the years.